Okay, I think we are live. Hello, Internet. And this is the Gauntlet Hangouts. We are going to be running a game today called Murkur, the Death Rolled Kingdom. And it is a Southeast Asian inspired fantasy setting written by two guys that live over in Malaysia. And it was something I was exposed to somewhat recently. And I think it's a beautiful work of art and an interesting fantasy setting. It does not tell you how to play in that fantasy setting, like it's not specific to a certain RPG game system. But I know that the two guys themselves, so ZXU and Mooncao, both have played a lot of D&D and a few other kind of games of that ilk. Me personally, I kind of felt like it called to be played in a slightly different way to give it kind of I don't know the to evoke the things that I wanted to see in it, and so that's what we'll be doing today. So before we get started, I will introduce myself and ask our cast here to introduce themselves, and then we'll talk a little bit about some of the prior to game minutia, like X card and maybe a cat's procedure and that kind of thing. And then we'll get into it. So my name is Tomer or Tomes. You will find me at the Gauntlet. I go using pronouns he, him. And that's it. And maybe I'll go across here. To me, the order is Pavel and then over to Lauren. So why don't we go that order?
Yeah, I'm Pavel. I'm also a member of the Gauntlet. I don't create anything on the internet, so I'm only seen on the Gauntlet YouTube videos. I go by the pronouns he, him as well.
And I'm Lauren. I am likewise a member of the Gauntlet. I go by she, her pronouns, and I am very excited for some self-indulgent high fantasy bullshit.
Hey, my name's Paul. I'm a member of the Gauntlet as well, and this is my first time playing Fall of Magic. I'm really excited about Murkur. It's going to be great.
Awesome. And to be clear, this is not exactly the Fall of Magic. This is Tomer ripping off parts of the Fall of Magic that he wanted to rip off to make something that kind of worked here for this particular game. So, but as far as games out there in the real world, this is probably one of the few that is similar to Fall of Magic, because I don't think there are too many other than Fall of Magic that do what it does exactly the way it does. So you'll see that it borrows some of that DNA. I also borrowed DNA from other things. And in fact, you can see some of that here. So things like, Apocalypse World and a little bit of like that Blades in the Dark conflict resolution that's in there. A little bit of like verbiage and things from World of Dungeons. And in fact, Lauren, who's here today, you played in kind of one of my first playtests where I did use World of Dungeons as kind of the system, and it was way too much. Like we just didn't use almost any of it. And that's when I was convinced that didn't quite hit the mark. So it'll be a little bit different this time around. Cool. So now, before we get into the game itself, one quick word about safety mechanics and that kind of thing. And maybe I'll kind of skip the whole CATS procedure, but I will ask a couple of questions about it. So the CATS procedure, which we sometimes use in the Gauntlet, talks about concept and aim, tone, and subject matter. And just kind of to summarize some of that first stuff, the game we're going to be playing here and summarized beautifully by Lauren is going to be self-indulgent high fantasy bullshit. We're going to be playing in a fantasy world. We're going to be playing it's going to be very story gamey, just all of us getting to take turns setting scenes and doing little role play sessions with each other, and occasionally having conflicts with either each other or with components of the world. And that's resolved by a very, very simple die mechanic. And what the results of that die mechanic means is going to be a little bit up to us in a similar way. If anybody's played, Apocalypse World-based games, there's going to be that kind of like 3 levels of success, and we'll just kind of see what happens, after that. And, we'll definitely do some of the writer room approach stuff. If anybody gets to a point where they're don't know where to take a thing, or not really sure what should happen in this scene, or as in a result of the conflict, we can work on that together. Metagaming is okay here because we are all here to tell an interesting story. So that's one aspect of it. As far as the tone, I like to think that this tone, there'll be humor here and there. We're definitely not going to go extreme gonzo. But the idea is, we want to explore in some fashion this interesting and maybe different than what we're used to fantasy setting. And in some ways, we're going to get to contribute to what this setting looks like. We are not just visitors here. We're going to be active participants. We may actually be from this world and from this land. So, but let me go around the table here. Does anybody have any thoughts on tone, or what they want to see or bring in as far as that goes?
I am curious, because you mentioned this is based on some South Asian, how much Crouch Diker Hidden Dragon are we going, and how much Western fantasy, Lord of the Ring, Wizards, and other stuff are we going? I'm trying to find my footing over here.
Great question, right? And I think that's what most people would probably, be asking themselves coming into this. So one of my jobs in this game, and to Paul's comments about Fall of Magic, for example, Fall of Magic is a GM-less game where all of us, equally create a character and are involved in creating the setting. Because this setting is a little bit specific, I kind of run it in a slightly different way, where you guys will be creating characters and I will be playing kind of like a GM role, or so I will kind of guide you in this place, right? I will be introducing you to aspects of the setting. But when you create the characters, as you're going to see in a moment, some of those characters come from places around here, but those places are fairly lightly defined. So again, you are going to be able to skin that, those characters kind of however you want, right? If you are a wizard of Meriting, well, where is Meriting? What does that mean to be a wizard from those places? That's going to be a little bit up to you. I'm going to play with that a little bit because I know a little bit of, how people react to a wizard of Meriting, but I also don't really know too much about these places, right? Now, as far as the stuff that's in the land we're going to, I know it's there. So I'm going to be playing a lot of the NPCs. I will be telling you about the environmental conditions and other stuff that's there, just like a GM would whenever you're, exploring a setting, right? But as far as things like this is Southeast Asia, I don't know anything about the religion or culture. I don't know. I've only seen certain kinds of Asian characteristics within, the context of movies and things like that, maybe from, East Asia or, other stuff like that. Feel free to add some of that stuff in there. If we feel like anything is explicitly kind of, uncomfortable or racist in tone, cards and things, and I will gladly, use some of it. And feel free, any of you, to use any of that. And we'll talk about X card in a moment. But you do not need to have any knowledge of any cultural stuff here. And there are two characters specifically that you can create who are from afar, and not actual name of a country, or whether afar just means from very, very far away. That is up to you. So you can always take those and actually be, some place that you are more familiar with, like a European fantasy setting or any other setting. And you can play those people traveling into this unknown land, right? And, just dealing with what they find. So there is an outlet to come in as the tourist, right? As somebody who doesn't even know what this place is. Does that kind of help answer the question?
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't really answer exactly what you'll see, but again, if you look at Fall of Magic as an example, even though it's kind of based on maybe European looking fantasy maps, I mean, you can take it any which way, and it really does not give you much to work with. Like, it's really up to you how you define that world and your characters and how they interact with the world.
That's perfectly fine.
Okay.
If I can jump with another question.
Yeah, please.
What is this game about? What are we aiming to create over here? Because from what I read, I read the basic rules to Fall of Magic. Characters are following some guy who tries to find the source of magic. Are we doing some kind of adventure movie over here? Are we going like, I don't know, like what is this, what do we want to create over here?
It's a great question, and one that I ran into smack dab in the face at the last con this last weekend, because that's exactly what I noticed we were kind of lacking. Now with Fall of Magic, there is a little bit of a story, and it's very loose and very, it doesn't give you much, but it does give you a direction. And what this place doesn't give in the context of, well, I mean, if you look at the actual written setting, it does not give you a goal. There's no goal. If you read between the lines, as you're reading like the NPCs and the locations and whatever, you can kind of see that there's stuff going on, and you can kind of interpret, oh, there's some tension between these people, or this person's seeking that and that one the opposite, So you can kind of make connections, but it's up to you to interpret, right? So when I created this, it's very much the same thing. Like, it's up to you to explore it. I know it's there, and I'll help guide a story out of it. And that worked really well the first 2 times I played it. And then the third time I played it, we got to a point where the story was not tying too well together. But I did one of those indie game things where we went metagame and said, wait a minute, we've got 30 minutes left. How do we want to see this end? And we each kind of went around the table and we made it sing in a beautiful way at the end of the game. So we could do something like that. However, what I will do is to that exact point, somewhere in the beginning here, as we're defining our characters and doing some of these first scenes, I do want to take a good little 5-minute step out of character for a minute and then see what you guys want to do. Do we want to kind of tie in the stories there? Do we want to just see where they go? That kind of thing. But you will see in the beginning, there is something that gives you enough to go, okay, this is why I'm here, right? And what I think I'm trying to say is I found that there wasn't enough to go, this is why we're here together, right? And that's what we'll have to figure out.
Cool.
Great question.
Yeah, I think my kind of motivation here is almost like an out of character thing. Like I just want to sort of see wondrous exploration. It's just kind of like exploring the wonders that the setting might have for us, and that's purely enough sort of motivation for me, I think.
Okay, that's good, because that's kind of what it's supposed to do. Great. All right. Then one last thing before we get started, and that is X-Card. And I think all of us are familiar with it, but for any viewers out there, I will really just mostly highlight, hey, if you've never heard of the X-Card, it's a great mechanic and tool. There's a couple of tools out there that are similar that are also great, like the script change tool, etc., by Bree Sheldon. And if you look up the X-Card, I think there's a tiny URL for it, but just X-Card RPG, you will find it. It'll talk about how it's used. The way we're going to be using it here today, if anybody has a problem with any content during the game, you can simply either say X-Card, you can do an X. We're going to probably have a role for your party window, which can do an anonymous X-Card as well. The main thing is, you don't have to explain why you have a problem with anything if you do not want to, and you will not be asked to. You may need to just clarify what you want to remove if it's not obvious. And that's it. And before we start, we kind of use the X-Card as an X-Card plus. So with lines and veils and other stuff mixed in with it. Is there anything anybody does not want to see in the game? And I'll start by saying, I will not, I'm drawing a line. There will not be sexual violence in this game, but I'm kind of open to everything else. So if people have problems with stuff like, violence against children or animals or, anything like that, And also, like, to what level? Like, maybe you don't mind that there's violence to animals in the background as part of the story, and maybe that's a motivator for you, but you don't explicitly want to see it in the foreground, like, as far as that kind of stuff. Let me know. We will be playing with lots of animals, so it would be good to know if that's a problem.
Yeah, I think like I just as you said, I'm okay with like I'm gonna sound like a terrible person. I don't know how to phrase it properly, but like some violence against animals and children, like sort of like not, I guess like not graphic like descriptions of violence against animals and children. But I'm fine if like I don't know, like there's some reprimanding like smacks like, or whatever or that kind of thing. Glossed over violence against children. I'm gonna stop talking now.
No, that's great though. Thank you for sharing that. I think that's useful. The second game I played, we did have a scene during the game, and we had this conversation at the beginning of that game as well. And nobody set that line. And there was a scene where a creature was hurt quite violently and gorily by another creature, right? And if somebody did have a problem with explicit violence against animals or gory imagery, that would have probably been close to hitting that.
Maybe I should clarify. I think I'm okay if it's like animal on animal violence. I think when it gets to like sort of people like inflicting violence against animals, I think that's like where it gets a bit like off tone for me.
So let's put a line against humans affecting any kind of like cruel violence against animals, like that doesn't. And I agree. I don't think that's in tone per se. Cool. Anything else?
I'd like to kind of put a veil over any scenes of like graphic torture or anything. If characters are kind of like restrained or anything and torture, it's let's just draw a veil over it and it can happen off screen.
Awesome. Okay. So torture, we've got that as a veil. All right. And anything we've forgotten or comes up, organically, we've got the X card for any of that as well. And if for any reason, I am starting to infringe on those lines and, like, again, I am the GM, I'm running this game. That does not mean I'm immune to any of this. So please, use the X card or let me know if I'm getting close to any of those things. Okay. Then I think we are ready to begin. So I will bring up kind of the first scene and we'll do character generation. And again, Lauren, this part's a little bit new, as far as how it works. I'm going to skip a bunch of stuff here and we get to this card. So hopefully you guys can all see this okay. And this is very, very similar to what Fall of Magic would look like as far as character generation. The idea here is you are going to choose a name. You are going to choose a title. And one thing that's a little bit different is you're going to also choose a trait. So as an example, I might choose the name Anura, and then, hold on, I'm just going to wait one moment while Paul's working on the mic, but I'm going to keep blabbing to make sure that he can hear me or not hear me. Give me thumbs up or thumbs down. I know he's got a little bit of an issue right now. How you doing, Paul? Is it going okay? Obviously, he can't hear me, so he doesn't even know I'm saying give me a thumbs up and thumbs down. Let's see. Blah, blah, blah. Maybe we should write something in the chat there. I'll say give us a thumbs up when you can hear us. Keyboard chatter. How is it going, Paul? Is it? Nope, I see him typing. Probably not good yet. Oh, I hear something. Yay. Okay. So everything's good? Yeah, nope, all good. Excellent. Okay. So as far as character generation, you're going to grab a name. You can take one of those names up there. I do not enforce that you need to take one of those names up there. My most recent game of Fall of Magic with kids, like they just made up their own names, and it was kind of rad. So, choose a name as you want. Those are names that are from around this setting, some of them. you can choose a title. And in this case, you will be either an uplander or a downlander. And I will read these things for you. Uplanders must pass through the place of crocodiles, Merc or Gur, where we're playing, to reach the outside world. Good relations must be maintained. So if you're an uplander, you're from these little bits of land that are kind of landlocked. And to get to the rest of the world, you have to go through this land, right? If you're a downlander, you come from the outside world. And there are many lands out there. And your motivation, who knows what that is? Whether or not you even have been to this land before, again, unknown. But we're going to be coming to Merkurgur from the outside world. So if you are an uplander and you are, normally need to go through this land to get out, you've done that before, and you're on your way back in. So that's kind of implied by the direction we're coming from. Cool. So that as far as choosing a title, the title is one of those things over on the right, right? Are you a Witch of Meriting or a Macaque of the Tui? Are you an Agent of Kraching? The two that are very ambiguous there are the ones from afar. If you're a trader from afar or a soldier from afar, like I said, that could be a place or that could be just from far, far away. While you guys look at that, I will be drinking my midnight cat coffee. Look at this cute little cup. I stole it from my daughter's cabinet.
I recently bought a teapot because I'm kind of the person that drinks a lot of tea. Teapot is horrible, but it had this very nicely made little pots for cups for
tea. Yeah,
tea, and they are really nicely stylish for Chinese or Japanese art.
Yeah. It's always nice to have some nice cups. Like even this one, if you look really close, it's, bumpy like that.
Oh.
It's all high quality. We only give the best stuff to my daughter.
Do you want to use the table horizontal or vertical?
Let's use it almost like a character keeper. So Paul, you'll take one column and then someone else will take another column.
Yeah, that's what I was waiting for.
Yeah, I put all these rows and columns, and I didn't say what they were for, and I still don't know what they're for. But we'll figure it all out. Best way to learn. Awesome, and yeah, give me one of the things as everybody's creating their character, put the pronoun for your character in there as well, so we know kind of what pronoun they use. Yeah, and if you want to put any other descriptive stuff in there, like notes, has this colored cloak, or looks kind of wild and crazy, or whatever it is, feel free. That can also just come up during play, so you don't need to write it down. If you want to just bring it out during the scenes is fine. Oh my God, 14-year-old Panya.
I'm excited about this.
I'm shaking with excitement. And then you'll notice down at the bottom, there's this list of traits. And the traits are, they have a plus sign in front of them because these are positive traits. They're generally things that, help you out, right? Most of these are fairly, self-explanatory, right? Like athletic or stealth, right? You know how to be stealthy. Some of them are almost like nouns, right? Like healer. So I guess you're a healer of some sort, right? Nimble. Some of these are a little more ambiguous, right? So there's some that are just, kind of like verbs that are not explained, like summon or cantrips, pet. like, what does pet mean? Does that mean you have a pet? Are you a pet? Like, what, you know, like, it's kind of a little bit up to you to interpret these, but all of these are, think of, you know, the one that you choose as core to your character, you know, almost like choosing an archetype in a D&D game or an Apocalypse World game. And it's something that's going to give you some benefit, right? It's a skill that you use regularly, right? And is core or intrinsic to your character.
Lauren, sorry, I just chose the trait pet, but then I just realized you just put in that you've got a rat familiar. So were you planning on taking the pet traits?
Well, we can. I mean, I'm so happy if we both have pets, but I can also go for a summon and have it more like a deep. Because as Tomer knows, this character is stolen from our Wodu game, in which I had like the rat familiar was a demon, so I can also use summon.
Okay, that's cool. That's cool. Because I was thinking of like my character being like almost like a kind of like a fauna druid type person who kind of communes kind of with the animals. So
we're gonna get along so well.
Yeah.
Sounds awesome. And if there are more than one character choosing one of these traits, that is not a problem at all.
Okay.
Yeah, I wanted to ask because I've seen that you are going for witch. So if you want to take someone, I can change archetype to something else. I have some other crazy idea.
I just saw that. I might go for cantrips things. I kind of maybe can I cheat and have a pet that doesn't give me a trait, but then take cantrips?
Sure. Yeah. All that means is that the pet, so you can flavor your character however you like throughout the game. And that pet can actually go in and do things for you. Whether or not it gives you some mechanical bonus is completely depending on this trait. So for example, you know, if Panya is trying to get her rat familiar to go and get something from a tree for her, if she doesn't have a plus pet trait, that just means she's just rolling a die, and it could still go positively, and the pet might do the thing she wants the pet to do. But, you know, if she's got plus pet, it means she gets a +1 to the roll, right? So, yeah.
Awesome.
Any of that works.
I mean, it's totally in character for Kakura to be like, nope, I'm not doing that. I'll go for cantrips.
Cool.
Yeah, and I had a mid-thought change of archetype I want to go for. So
sure, sounds good.
How do you call this hairstyle that is like 70s and 60s, like this big like hair going in all directions? Like usually the Afro-Americans had them like. Is there a specific name for this?
Surprisingly, it's called an afro.
Okay.
So that's one way to call it. I mean, you know, there's other names, but you know, like if you said afro, that usually is what it means. I know that there's some set of Jewish people who have very kinky curly hair, so they sometimes call it a Jewfro if it's a Jewish person with an afro. I've seen different things. But yeah, afro will work. We know what that means. I do not believe that is intended with any derogatory intention, and I don't believe the word implies that at this point.
Yeah, I wasn't sure. So
who knows if that changes over time. Yeah. Cool. All right. So we have 3 very interesting characters so far. Cool. And what I'm going to do is we will introduce these characters as we see them play out in our initial scenes. So we don't need to introduce them right now. We'll do like little vignettes, right? Vignette is a word everybody, like when I first ran into it during gaming, I was like, what? But does vignette, is that a word that you guys are familiar with?
Yeah, like a little short scene.
Yeah. The first time I ran into it years ago, they were like, vignette. And I'm like, I don't know what that, I don't know literature. I don't know English. What does that mean? But yeah, like just a little short scene. And so we're going to do that to introduce our characters in these next few scenes. Is everybody ready? Cool.
Yes.
So, all right. So we did this initial character generation part. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to head to this land, the land of crocodiles. So we are traveling down a river, and yeah, as it says, there are limestone cliffs on the side. We may have been traveling on this river for a little bit of time. The river starts to widen, and we see kind of what looks like, a moderately sized lake. Someone is, and maybe we see this person actually helping us guide us down this river. And maybe they're the first person we see, when this story starts. I'm going to say their name is Nina. And Nina is, a very robust woman. She is, has got really strong muscles. There was one or two times where I think we even, like before we get to this lake, we see a couple of scenes of just, different thin rivers with different scenery, whether it's kind of like overgrown, different kinds of jungles or like a fern forest, maybe this boat going underneath, not quite underneath, but like through a small ruined stone bridge, with a burnt out, little set of dwellings on the side of the road, on the side of the river. And, we see, even though the river is pushing against the boat, and sometimes with a little bit of rapids, we can see her just, very calmly pushing with a very long stick. And those muscles are kind of like rippled and thick. And we find ourselves now in a calmer part of the river. And, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and choose one of these tracks. So let's go ahead and grab one. I'm going to play track 1A. That's for us. Sorry, viewing audience at home, you will not get to listen to this with us. But, one day through the magic of editing, maybe. So my question is to any of you. You see this card, right, as players, right? You see this card here. It's got a couple of different story prompts on it, right? So if you have played Fall of Magic, you'll recognize kind of what this looks like. We have an image, and these story prompts are there to give you an idea of how you might want to set your scene. And what I'm going to ask of you is to give me a little bit of a vignette. It could be just your own character, just by themselves on that boat. They could be interacting with Nina, or they could be interacting with each other, depending on how the scene flows. So feel free to incorporate others into your scene. But what you're going to do is choose one of these story prompts. Give us an idea of how that comes into play. Maybe start by showing us your character. What do they look like? When the camera pans to them, right? What do we see? And at some point, you're going to have to choose one of those negative traits that are on the bottom of the card, right? Let us know what that is as a player. And for the viewing audience, let us know the trait that you choose. And it could be after the scene's over, but I want to hear that explicitly. But you can imply it through the scene, right? So, for example, if you chose the trait of destitute, which means very poor, right? And with no money or goods, like show us that during the scene so we get a feel for what that looks like. Yeah, but whenever anybody's ready, feel free to take the control. We don't need to go in, any kind of specific order here.
A question, what are the prompts searching for?
Good question. So one of the prompts says searching for, and then it's got a bullet list of a couple of different things. Now, these are goods. These are goods that can only be found in the Deathrolled Kingdom, the place where we are going. So if you are looking for these things, this is where you're going to find them, right? Now, why you're looking for these things, that's going to be a little bit up to you. And in fact, maybe one of those negative traits at the bottom has something to do with that, right? Now, as far as what those things are exactly, I'm going to say this. You've probably heard rumors. You might have an idea of what they are, and I may ask you, what you've heard or what you know about it. it. And some of that might be true, and some of it might not be true. And we will find out.
I think I have an idea to jump in with the vignette, but I'm just trying to grasp the idea. How big of a boat are you thinking? And are you thinking about like a small 4-people boat, and there's only like 4 of us, or?
I think it's definitely a boat that one person can, Nina, one person can manage. However, Nina is a very strong individual. So it could be a boat that's larger than we would normally expect one person to manage by hand. But it's not like a steamship or anything large. It's not. I mean, it has to be able to navigate some of these smaller streams and and rivers that are heading this way. So it's definitely not a very big boat. But as far as what the boat looks like, is it flat? Is it like a canoe style boat? You let me know. We'll see.
Mhm.
So if you have specific thoughts on something you want in the scene, do it.
Yeah, sure. I'd like to go first. So we see Ursan, and he's a huge man. He's like 6'5". I mean, he's called the bear. And he looks like a bear. He's very hairy, big beard big brown beard, like down to his waist. And he's wearing like a dyed green kind of sarong. So you can see like all his hair, his body hair, like all over him, and he's reclining at the back of the boat, and he's kind of leaning over to one side, like trailing his hand like in the water that goes past, and because he's so big, like him leaning over the side is making the boat kind of almost like tip up slightly, and I imagine like Nina's kind of every time she punts the boat along, she's kind of looking over and giving him like a stern look, like, oh, don't do that. And he's trailing his fingers in the water, and there's these small little fish. You can see them kind of they're sort of following his fingers as he traces them sort of through the water, and it's almost like he's conducting the fish to like a tune, like in his head. And he mutters to himself under his breath, but loud enough for everyone on the boat to hear. And he's like, I pray that I find the teak nymph on this journey. It's the only thing that will lift the curse from my village.
And I think
maybe
it's
just a myth.
Sorry. Yeah, no. So I think you say this, and at this point, I don't think Nina has been very conversant, and she probably doesn't. She's not doesn't seem super friendly. At least that's the impression you've had thus far. And I think she turns and, she's slowly paddling the boat, just very rarely at this point because the water is so calm. One push with the, her very long stick allows it to go quite a distance. And so it's a very calm moment. And, anybody who's looking at Nina at this time, which I don't think is you, but, anybody else who would look over, sees one of her eyebrows go up at the mention of the teak nymph. And, she says, well, what is this curse, if you don't mind me prying?
Oh, it is a terrible story. I would not wish to spoil such a wonderful day by telling you of my trials and tribulations. But if you really do want to hear.
And then she says, oh, I think, right, like you guys interrupt each other, right? The part where you're like, if you really want to hear, she says, oh, too true. Like, as if you're right, let's not spoil it, right? And she turns and says, and maybe she gets this faraway look and she's looking forward, toward where the boat is going. And she says, well, if you seek a teak nymph, you need to be warned to bring them to fruition. That is quite a journey, a 9-month journey, in fact.
9 months, and I kind of reach over and like sort of look through this this sort of leather, no, like a canvas kind of knapsack I've got next to me, and rush on. I was like, but we've only had provisions for 7 days.
Yes, indeed.
Oh, the lords, we're going to go hungry.
She says, but fear not. What you can do is you can find the beginnings of a teak nymph and just bring it with you, but you will have to find someone to nurture it, and that does take time and a commitment. Not everybody, not every woman is ready for that kind of commitment. And you notice this is the first time she mentions that something about a female, right? Like, that the teak nymph, it's not anybody who can bring a teak nymph, to fruition, whatever that means. And yeah.
Yeah, I kind of give a bit of a side eye to Nina and sort of, I almost like sort of look down into the water, and I'm like talking to the fishes, but like loud enough for her to hear. And I'm like, she probably doesn't know what she's talking about, does she? No. But you, my pretties, you are so beautiful.
And I think, and we can wrap up the scene right there. But I think anybody else who's looking at Nina sees her when she mentions it's not anybody who can bring them to fruition. You see her like absent-mindedly touching her stomach, as she's paddling the boat, and she has that faraway look. But yeah, the scene ends right there.
Cool.
Beautiful. Is anybody else ready to go?
I think I am.
I'm going to change the track as we do this. I'm going to grab, well, I don't know, Lauren, do you want something a little more melancholy or something a little more cheery-ish? Not that it's cheery. But...
I guess both are. So I think this is going to be like the last time Panya sees her mother. So it depends if you think it's going to be happy or sad.
In between, we will do a track 1. Let's try 1B, see how it goes. All right.
Oh, perfect.
Oh, and just for clarity, you chose, Ursun chose as the negative trait, correct?
Cursed, yes.
Okay, and you can add that to your character keeper there.
Okay, I shall.
Under plus pet, you can just, but yeah.
So I think this takes place on the outskirts of Panya's village. I think her people in particular in this part of Meriting are mostly nomadic, but this is like a place that they've occupied for some time. And it has that kind of and you can kind of tell because like the buildings there are not built to last kind of thing. They're built out of materials from the earth, and there's they've made use of a lot of the natural elements around them to like protect themselves from whether it be people or animals or the elements. And little Panya is there, all 5 feet of her, and she's looking up at her mother, who's probably 6 foot. Both are wearing sort of ritualistic robes. They aren't too fancy. Again, they're sort of taking advantage of sort of the fur and feathers and like natural adornments of the environment around them. And there's like feathers and stuff like woven into Panya's hair. And her mother places her hands upon her shoulders and says, "Child, time for you to go to find your own path on this journey. I would be sad to see you go, only I know that you shall return victorious." And I think like Panya pouts and is like, "Mom, I don't want to do this. This is dumb." And her mom's like, "Panya, you want to be the Grand Witch of Meriting, don't you?" And Panya's like, Yes, I guess. And it's like, well, if you want to be the Grand Witch of Meriting, one has to undergo the trial. For if you are not ready to bear that responsibility, then you are surely not fit to be Grand Witch. And Patty's like, okay, fine. Mother's like, now tell me, what must you do? Patty's like, I've got to go find the honey of something. Mother's like, again? And Patty's like, I've got to go find the corpse honey. It's not that hard, Mother. And Mother's like, I do wish you would take yourself more seriously, Panya. It's not becoming of an apprentice witch. Panya's like, you're not becoming an apprentice witch. And it's like, what? And Panya's like, nothing. Okay. I know what I need to do. I've got to go find the corpse honey, bring it back, have tea with the Grand Witch of Meriting, and then everything will be fine. I'll start my studies. I'll be good. I'll take this seriously, I promise, Mum. And Mother's like, very well. Well, travel safe, child. And
I like the idea of there's actually like as they're having this discussion, we see somebody walking through the village, right? And they've got these huge pots in front of them, 2 or 3 of them, and they're being led by the merchant, whoever the main merchant is, and it's obviously honey, right? Like big pots of honey. And I think your mother's not even facing that direction, but she looks down and she says, don't even think about it.
And you can see like Kakora's nose is like twitching in the air as if to signify that Panya is definitely thinking about it. And her fingers are twitching a bit with like cantrips that are ready to sort of like fly out of her fingers. But she like sort of puffs her shoulders and is like, fine. Go on the dumb quest.
Yeah. And she even says, the Grand Witch would know.
That's amazing. I think it's a good scene.
Awesome. So I think we see that like that's all happening in Panya's head, right? Like this kind of like flashback scene. And then, but we kind of see, her on the boat and then that scene and then her again, on this boat. Is the Panya on the boat, does she look very different than the Panya that was in the village?
Oh yeah, totally. I forgot to wrap in like the trait. I think like her mother like hands her off with like a bit of a tear with like some bread and perhaps some like cured fish and says like it's not much but like take this with you and like be well fed kind of thing. So I think like as we see her on the boat, it's like leaving town, her hair was very like pristine and like brushed and stuff, and I think as she's like had to forage her way through to like get on Nina's boat, this is like a lot scruffier and like she's got stains around like the hem of her like robes and that kind of thing from mud and dirt.
Nice. What negative trait are you taking from this scene?
I will take destitute.
All right. Awesome. Okay. Cool.
So I think the camera maybe like pans from. Do you pronounce it like Panya? So I think maybe the camera like pans to Panya from Panya to like the other side of the boat, and we see there a man that is like way too colorful to be taken seriously. He wears this like very fancy looking kimono that isn't like super like orangey and red, but it's like like green with some like nice maybe like a red tree symbol that is a symbol of his faction, of his land. And he has like this huge afro, but we don't see his face right now. We see he's looking like over the side of the boat into the water, And over there, we see like completely different scene. In the water, we see like some faraway temple burning on fire. People like shooting arrows inside the temple, and then we see like this young boy like sneaking through some like hole in the fence, and then all the arrows just like completely avoid him. But we see that he has been severely burned through the fire from the temple. And then maybe like the camera like pans up, and we see Mahi hands, and he burns like scorch marks on his hands, and the camera shows more. He has like some part of his face looks like it was like really severely burned, and we see his face then, that it could be like nice looking, but apart from this like burns, he has like one eye is green and the other one is orange, and there's like a complete like what's colorful kimono. There's like one eye, one color, the other one color. This is like someone like bizarre even in this land, and maybe we see like Mahi is like shaken from his like things over the temple, over the past, and we see this image like completely swims down the river with the water, and he like turns to a man that was on the boat with us, that seems to be like a merchant, and we resume like negotiations, and he comes back and says, I have considered your proposal, Mr. What would be the title over here? I have considered your proposal, Machi. I think we should really sign up this treaty. It seems like very good. And Machi replies with like deep voice, yes, we, Kraching, only trade and offer very good deals for the materials we need, the spirit mangoes.
Ooh, nice. And this is what does the boat look like? I mean, is this like a fairly large trading ship that you like? This is all a flashback, right?
This can be a flashback, or this can be this boat. It doesn't have to be like really huge, just to like us and maybe like some material somewhere in the corner, and then Nina just like paddling this boat down the river. So
here's something that I'd love to see is like, we originally see Mahi in this land far away, right? Very different from where we are now, right? Mm-hmm. And all this, activity and escape. And then, the Mahi that we see in that initial scene with the battle, is that a Mahi that's a very different age than the Mahi that we see now? Or is it kind of similar?
I think younger. I imagine Mahi being like in his 20s, and this was like, maybe you would say that he's at the vision at the beginning. He was just at the age of becoming an adult. So
okay.
So a few years back, not like ages ago.
Okay. I kind of like the idea of that initial negotiation, right, is happening on a more like on a trading vessel, like on a larger ship. And then, there's that, spirit, he says spirit mango. And, there's, I think there's the captain who you were talking to, right, and the main merchant. And then, the assistant to his side. And he's like, you see his eyes are like, spirit mango, like that's, a big deal, right? And I think what we see is this kind of montage of, of Mahi on the search for this thing. And, we see him in a market and somebody's holding up some mangoes, right? Mm-hmm. And, and maybe he's purchasing them, but that's not the right thing. And then we see like he's traveling on all sorts of different kinds of boats, right? So we see, at different periods of time, he's on this kind of boat and that kind of boat. And they're obviously from different cultures. One is like a hollowed out log. One is a raft. One is like kind of like these junk style ships that you'll see, near from Hong Kong back in the, earlier times, and some Western, looking ships and whatever, like different types of vessels. And then the montage ends with you on this boat, right? This little dinky raft, or just going up this river, right? And it's obvious like you have not yet found the spirit mango, right?
Totally
But
makes
this
sense.
is where the journey's taken you. Yeah. Cool. And so you chose maimed as the negative trait, and we saw that first scene with the fire, right?
Yeah, it's a bit of a twist on maimed, but because it should be like burned, but I think it's kind of the same.
Yeah.
Like,
I had in one game, maimed was the character had like PTSD from being in battle, so it was nothing external. Like he was maimed like mentally. So like, yeah, you can totally take these. However, no, I think that's perfectly fine. Does his maimed hand, like, what does that look like when we see it now, right?
I think now we see that it's not so much like, it's almost that he has been burned because maybe he had like the fresh skin regrew, and maybe his original skin tone is like a little bit darker, not like Afro-American, but like something like Latin, so not even like
a dark mid-brown type.
Yes,
look.
yes, and this like new skin has like grown in the place of the burn, so it's obvious that is like super white skin, and he's like this, like almost like a mix, like half of this is like his original skin and half of this like newly grown, but it's not obvious that he has been in some terrible accidents and had severe burns, but it's like healing over time.
Does this affect his ability to use that hand to any degree? Or is it just cosmetic? Like it just looks.
Well, if it's somehow negative trait, I think it should to some degree affect him.
Sure.
Yeah.
So
Can
maybe
I ask? Is Mahi? Is he like embarrassed about it? Does he try to hide it, or does he like show it off to everybody?
No, he surprisingly he seems to be like very proud about it. Which might be surprising and maybe like a good topic to some side discussion. Because normally people will like try to hide it, but he's like wearing like in his fancy kimono has like a very short sleeve, so that it's like everyone can see this like hand, and this was burned.
Okay. Cool. Oh, that's great. All right. So we've had 3 scenes. Is there anything that anybody wants to say before we move on to the next location? All right. And by the way, all of this is still like character generation, like in the context of what I guess maybe you'd think of in a normal game, right? I don't know. So let's see where we go next. So we're heading upriver, and I think at some point, our friend Nina, we see a little bit of maybe a mist fall. I mean, the weather here is fairly humid. I mean, Nina herself is only wearing just like a wrap around her midsection, right? Otherwise, she's naked. I mean, most people who you've seen over the last few, days as you've been going upriver, dress pretty light. Occasionally, you'll see like a shaman, and they'll have like a bunch of clothes on. But even then, it's more flowing robes and things like that. I'm going to switch over to 1C, track 1C, upriver. So what happens is, the weather shifts sometimes during the day multiple times. We've started to get used to this a little bit, I think, where we see, sometimes it'll be overcast or low clouds. There'll be a drizzle almost constantly. Sometimes there'll be a mist. Every once in a while, those clouds and the mist will clear. And then we have, a very hot sun, shining down on us. Most of the vegetation is very, what you'd expect from something around the equator, right? Tropical, in this case. It's lush, and fairly hot. But there's moments of reprieve, right? When it cools down, and when you get that rain, and it's never cold rain, right? It's always kind of like a warm, short, strong showers. Right now, there's a mist, and you can feel it on your skin. Your hair will kind of have those little dewdrops on it like you'll see on a spider web, right? And you know, the rivers opened up even further, right? I mean, we were in a bit of a lake for a while. It was very calm, and now it's quite open. And this is the first time you see Nina actually take her stick out of the water. And it's a very interesting stick because it's, you know, she's always holding it about here, right? And it seems to go very deep. I mean, sometimes you're in the middle of the lake and she still seems to be pushing against the bottom. But you can see her start to like pick it up, you know, out of the water, and it still never gets longer than 10 feet. And in fact, she's taken it completely out of the water, and it looks like it can, you know, it barely goes into the surface of the water, right? But she takes it and puts it on the boat, and we see her pick up a paddle that she has not picked up this entire time, and she starts to use it occasionally. Again, very lightly. The water's very calm, and she starts humming a little bit of a tune. And turns to you, and the language is not one that maybe you recognize, but she turns to all of you and says, "We approach the gates. They're not far. You'll probably make them out in the mist in not too long." And indeed, you know, within like less than a minute after she says that, you can kind of make out some shapes in the mist. And at first they look like they must be really close because the mist is thick, right? You know, so you can kind of see these little things and you're like, oh, we're almost there. But then she keeps going and keeps going. And it turns out that they're not that close. The mist is thick. They're not that close. They're just huge. So it takes a while before you see these things kind of realized, you know, within your vicinity. And they are massive. I'm going to jump to another track, which is O2, the gates. And adjust my volume accordingly. These gates are huge. They look like two crocodiles facing each other with their mouth wide open. And you're not sure if they're really crocodiles. I mean, maybe that's just kind of how they look. Maybe it was a bridge that is broken in the center. Maybe they used to connect. But it's kind of funny because as the bridge has fallen apart and rocks have fallen into the water, the rocks that are down there under the bridge look like the teeth that are in the bottom of the crocodile's mouth. So really, the more you look at it, you really can't distinguish whether this is supposed to be two crocodiles facing each other, or maybe it once was some kind of bridge, unknown. But they're different. If it was a bridge, it was really weird and fantastic because one side you see is black stone, right? And the other side is white, completely white stone, and it's not even the same kind of stone. On one side, you have these huge black rocks that make this thing. None of them are smaller than like a full-size oxen, right? And then on the other side with the white stones, you can't even make out where one stone starts and the other ends. They look like columns that twist around each other, right? In some weird kind of organic fashion. And they make up, you know, that crocodile or that side of the boat, so that side of the bridge. And, you know, whatever architecture holds them up, it makes no logical sense. But, you know, the world is full of magic, so there must be some magic there that holds these things up. And we see our friend Nina stop singing, and she turns to you and says, "You're about to enter the land of the scaled ones. And let me give you a word of advice. They don't take too kindly to the mispronunciation of their land, so don't even try." And, you know, she stops for a moment. There's a little bit of silence. And then she says, this land used to be a great kingdom, a kingdom of people who forgot their station. And they created wonders beyond imagining. And she kind of like sweeps her hand a little bit at the crocodiles, you know, so maybe this is a, you know, part of that, right? And says, "But beware, they were wicked and they were cast down, and the gods eventually came and destroyed their civilization, and the crocodiles came and cleansed it, and it's a better place because of this. But beware, there are artifacts that they've left behind, and they are cursed. You know, I warn you against trying to come here to gain power. All who do so have failed and have regretted their decisions." Right? And she goes like from that into some song where, and you get a sense that the song she's singing is basically their oral tradition of talking about that story, right? And it's much more, you know, intricate, but maybe you don't get most of those words. I don't know. So yeah, all of you can choose. We're going to have another scene here, and this is a scene as we're going through or passing the gates. And we're going to choose another positive trait. So we have a couple down at the bottom there. And I will have you notice, if you look at the picture, you can see the boat down there. I don't know if my mouse comes across here. Maybe it does. Yeah, there's like this little boat that's about to go through these crocodile gates. So they're truly massive.
I have a question. Are we going to establish relation between our characters? Do we establish that they know each other? Are we supposed to play that they are strangers? I'm just trying to like...
Fantastic question. So, and this is the perfect time for it. So I mentioned earlier in our discussions that in my most recent prior game, one of the things that I think it could have used was a little bit of, you know, how do we interact with each other? Why are our goals interlinked? You know, kind of establishing those inter-party bonds, if you will. And in the initial games, we just kind of like, you know, like a lot of that onus was on the players to do that. There wasn't anything mechanically in the game or even any story prompts that really established that. And honestly, I'm not 100% sure what the best way to go about it is, but I think if we all kind of keep in mind that during this scene, let's try to have scenes where at least one other individual is in that scene, right? So we're communicating together about things. Like, how do we figure out where we sit with each other? How long have you been traveling together? I have no idea, right? Like, what have you been talking about? Have you talked at all? Maybe this is your initial conversation. From what I've gathered so far, we do have, you know, a search for a teak nymph. We have a search for corpse honey, and we have a search for spirit mango. There's a lot of looking for goods that come from this kingdom, right? So, you know, and how did we get on this boat? You know, we do have to pay a fare to get here. You know, how was that established? So it'll be interesting to find out, especially as one of our party is destitute, right? How did she even pay to get down here? Did she?
I paid with fake coins.
Have those coins disappeared by now, by the way?
Probably. My cantrips aren't that good.
Okay. Good to know.
Yeah, so this time maybe I will jump forward. And I think maybe Maki and Ursan are like standing on the front of the boat, and maybe like on the bench of the rivers, we see like real crocodiles of various sizes, and I think Maki will start a conversation pointing at one of them. Ursan, have you ever had an occasion to ride on a giant crocodile like that giant one over there?
Oh, my dear friend, you do amuse me so. Why would you want to ride a crocodile? It's a majestic creature. It's not something to be made into a slave, into a mount. It's something to be admired.
But they are also completely aggressive. Last time I was traveling through the gates, 10 of them came on the both sides of the boat I was on, and they started biting and chopping pieces of the boat, and they grabbed the paddler first. And I look at Nina to see if she's like, and any reaction from her.
Well, mate,
you as soon as you guys started talking about the crocodiles, and especially when there was mention of, I think by Ursun, and mentioning something like, you used the word slave, and like, why would you want to ride these majestic creatures? And I think, Nina kind of scoffs, right? She gives this, she's not interacting with you guys yet, but she gives this really big, kind of reaction.
Mm-hmm.
So, as I was saying, they came on both sides of the boat and started taking this to pieces. And then this biggest one, just like size of this huge one over there, like came after me, but for some reason it couldn't like hit me. So then I jumped on it. I wrapped the rope and put it into its mouth and forced him to drive me back to the land. Unfortunately, none of the other travelers were so lucky as I was.
Did you ever think, my dear friend, that maybe if you just treated these beautiful creatures with some respect and some honor, then they wouldn't have started trouble with you? They wouldn't have tried to chomp on your flesh.
Well, I might have been drinking too much booze back then, but they came after all of us on the boat, so I'm lucky that this time we have professional paddler who knows this tribal songs, maybe the songs. I think that these songs really scare the crocodiles. That's the thing with the songs.
And as you guys are having this conversation, and Nina's kind of, we can just see her slowly shaking her head as if you're missing something very big, right? We see we're not far from, we're actually getting very close to a group of crocodiles, and one of them is, maybe 10 feet away, or will be very shortly as they're coming down the river, passing the other way. And we're probably close to the gates at this point, right? Like passing under the gates. And this one kind of, their head is just over the water, and the eyes are definitely staring very intentionally at you guys on the boat. But yeah, so what do you do as far as that? I mean, are you planning to try to talk to or otherwise engage with a crocodile? There's a lot of talk here. I'm just wondering how much of it is blustery talk and how much of it is real action.
Yeah, I will totally. Sam will totally sort of commune with the crocodiles and show them respect.
Okay.
He can sense. He can sense that. Yeah, that Mahi is correct. Like that they are coming towards us with aggression.
Okay.
And he'll stand on the bow of the boat. Out in the drizzle, and cast his arms wide and address the crocodiles.
Let's do this. I'm going to change the track to, let's see here. Yeah, let's try it. We're going to do 9T. So I'm just going to throw that in the background. We're going to open up a window. I'm going to give you guys a link in just a second, which is a roll for your party window. I'll put that in the chat here. Arguably renewing Garfish. How appropriate. And what I will request is go ahead and have you used this before, Paul?
Yeah, I'm familiar with it. Yeah.
Okay, so go ahead and roll 2 6-sided dice. And this is not any conflict resolution thing. Actually, untick the sort dice at first, or it actually doesn't matter.
There you go.
So
I rolled a 2 and a 3.
Okay. So a couple things. This crocodile, you know, we're passing the rest of them, right? There's this group of crocodiles swimming downriver. And I think, well, I guess I have a question for you. How do you normally commune with things? Like, how does this look on your end? I mean, prior to the crocodile actually responding to you, like, what do you do?
He does this thing, you notice, like where he kind of steps up onto the prow of the boat, yeah, and he kind of like, he sort of pulls open like his sort of sarong he's wearing. So he's kind of got, takes one of the shoulders off, so he's kind of bare chested. And he stands there like, and as he gestures like out to the crocodiles, he's kind of like rubbing his big like hairy belly, like that. And as he talks, like, and he starts rubbing his kind of belly like kind of faster, and his voice like becomes kind of louder and more booming, and it almost, it sounds like it's coming from a man like 3 times his size. You can almost hear his voice like echoing back like off the mountains, sort of big booming voice.
Nice. So I think we see these 3 crocodiles go past, and 2 of them are a little bit further away, and they continue. But this one that's close to the boat, it's almost like it's going in reverse now. It's keeping parallel with you guys, right? And so it's just sitting there a few feet from the boat with its eye staring directly at you. And what you notice about this crocodile is it's got white scales, not like what you would normally expect, like that kind of deep green or darker kind of, muddy look. The scales are like very, very bright, almost like it's an albino crocodile or something. But it has these twin stripes that go down its back. So there's these set of scales, not in a straight line, but in like a slightly zigzag pattern, that are kind of maybe the color you'd normally expect crocodiles to be. It stops and it kind of blinks its eyes and says, and what does it sound like when you're talking? Are you speaking in English or in whatever the common language is that you guys are speaking? Or is it kind of like some other, does it come out in animal tone, or do they just understand your?
No, I'm talking in the common tongue, but
right.
But my voice, it kind of, the tone of it, the timbre kind of changes, like to almost, to like as if I kind of was like a reptile, like maybe it becomes like a bit more like a hissy, and I sort of pronounce my S's really long, and yeah, I'll address this crocodile. Maybe I lean down like off the bow of the boat, like sort of towards it.
Yeah.
And I'll address, almost kind of bow to the crocodile, and I'll address it and say, friend, reptilian friend, we are here hoping to pass through your honored kingdom. We do not wish you any harm or disrespect. We come in peace and we come in honor.
And all 3 of you hear the response. And, it speaks also in the common language that you guys understand. And it says, you say not to be insulting, and yet here you are speaking to me with your and it kind of like mimics your drawl and that kind of thing. And it says, please, I can tell you are not from here, but let us speak as one crocodile speaks to another.
I am willing to parley with you, friend. I'm willing. Do you have a request of us to allow us to pass through your domain peacefully?
And, there's some sound that comes out of it. I mean, it's hard to interpret what the emotion is behind it. Maybe it's like a chuckle. Maybe it's something else more sinister. But it makes some kind of sound and then says, well, I do have the ability to upturn your boat, I suppose. But now that wouldn't be very polite. And this isn't really my domain. These are not my gates. These are the gates of the king. And yes, this is my land as much as anybody's, but it's not my place to say. And at this point, I think all three of you notice that the boat is floating about 5 feet above the water, right? So it's not actually in the water anymore. And we can see that that Nina, she's not completely surprised by this, but she's also, like, you can see she's a little bit tensed up. Like her muscles have definitely, give off that look.
Could I like poll the table and like kind of ask like what everyone else's characters are kind of thinking when they see like Ursan like talking with this crocodile kind of thing, and the boat lifting out the water,
and specifically that you all understand this as well. Yeah, what are you doing?
Go ahead, Pena.
He is so cool. I wish I could do that. All I can do is like, I don't know, make these like fake coins and like throw shadows and like make flames bigger. I can't summon a friggin' boat and talk to a crocodile and shit. I think he's just like sort of anime hot eyes like at Ursan.
And I think we see Arsur Kerr, which is the name of this crocodile, and she introduces herself as such at that point. We see her actually look, she looks at you. You're convinced, it looks like she looks at you, and she gives kind of like a little bit of a wink. But you do hear, like, you're replaying what you just said, and you mentioned the fake coins, and you can hear Nina like digging in her pouch behind you, right? So that's also happening.
And yeah, I think Maki is very calm. Like, he knows that his luck is like beyond measure. So, but he's like surprised, not like jaw drop surprise, but for him, the crocodiles were like a mindless beast, and now they talk and they want something.
I imagine I imagine Mahi's like quite a well-traveled man of the world. Like, has he seen kind of magic like this before?
Well, that depends if we are actually floating on magic or if we are on the back of one of the crocodiles, which remains to be seen. So maybe we actually like see Maki being curious and like lean over. He's like completely unafraid on the side where the crocodile is. Just like lean over. Are we like floating in the air, or is there like a? I think I'm not sure who is to say it. What happens over there, but he definitely like leans over the board and just see. Maybe we are actually on the back of the huge crocodile.
Yeah, and I think we see Arsur Kerr turn to you, to you all, and says, "Well, my friends, I'm sure you'll have a pleasant stay in our land, as long as we all mutually respect each other." And you can tell that part of it is, she seems to be implying, learn to respect your, your equals. But there's also part of it which maybe it means, respect your elders. And it sounded almost like more like she was saying not so much you need to learn how to be polite, but I have learned how to be polite, and that's why you're still going to be okay, right? There's like this unimplied threat under, but kind of amused. And although she's been following you, kind of almost gliding backwards as you've been going toward the gate, we suddenly see that she starts going in the other direction and catching up with her mates there. And there's a moment where you're watching that, and then the entire boat just falls, and you can feel, your stomachs kind of, get out of your body for a moment as the boat falls about 5 feet and just hits the water with a huge, splash. And And yeah, I think I think that's where kind of that scene ends.
Yeah, just a question, because we are supposed to pick a trait as well.
Yes.
Do you want to allow? Because I think the scene was more about Ursan than about Maki. Is it like fair for me to like give a trait to Ursan?
No, it's a good question. I think most of the time I've done this where you give the traits to yourselves. If I'm open to the process of suggestions of going like, hey, Urson, this is something that I see, what do you think? And then, it's really up to you in the end as the player to decide whether or not that makes sense for your character. Also, just because that scene is over does not mean we have to be done with the gates. I would actually like to see, like the other ones are a little bit more internal. And so I'd like to see a little bit of, maybe, it doesn't have to be for everybody, but I'd love to see, if you guys want to play with some of those other story cues. And you can also use that to choose the trait as well. I think the one we just had, this scene, was very good at least giving us a little bit of like interplay, even though we still don't know how we relate to each other exactly, right?
Yeah.
So what do you guys think? Is there some other story prompt that you want to explore before we move?
I know I have one.
Okay.
Self-indulgent with a capital S.
Yes.
But if you want to take a break, I noticed you said you want to take a break.
Yeah, let's do that. So we're going to take a little, let's see, let's do 5 minutes. Right now it's 45 past the hour here. So why don't we take a break for 50 past the hour? And then we'll kind of come back.
Cool.
All right. See you soon. I switched to a different track for now. Put in the chat. So it's interesting because this question of, party cohesion or story cohesion or whatever, like I've been thinking about that, but I haven't formalized anything yet. But I was actually kind of curious now that you guys have seen this part of it. And like after here, we kind of just go into the story. There's a bunch more of these cards. Many of them don't have story prompts, some do. And it just kind of like here, it's a little bit more of the GM guided, depending on what framework you guys have given and where you decide to go, right? But one of the things I've been thinking in my head is perhaps what we need, maybe even here, is almost like a goal, right? And the goal is something that we maybe collaboratively decide on, which is, possibly like a meeting with the king, or, a confrontation with a demon idol, or some other of these things, which are fairly like major parts of, what this place tries to showcase, right? And all of them is just, it's almost like just that's the end point, right? We're going to have some kind of big conclusion there or a big scene there, but there's still a lot of other stuff to play with before or after, right?
Yes,
and nothing. I haven't written anything down yet. So I guess my question is, maybe we can decide on one of those things right now. Like you guys all have goods that you're looking for. And so, I mean, it could be that this end goal is getting the goods from the master merchant. I know, Lauren, you've met the master merchant before, but the master merchant might just be the person who delivers them. Perhaps there's some reason why the master merchant is going to give you those goods. More interestingly, I think, would be finding these goods on your own. And I think all three of these are things that can be found out there, on your journey. But what I'm worried about there is that I'm worried that, each one of you has a completely different direction in that sense, right? I mean, sure, all these things could be found in the same place or whatever, but why would you, what is it that keeps us together here on this travel, right?
Well, I mean, I wonder, is there like at the end of the river, is there like a kind of a final destination where like all these things could be found? You know, so we're we're together because we chartered this boat together, and boats don't come up this way very often. So
Right.
Or is that too vacuous a reasoning?
No, I think that could work. And one thing that I'm interested in exploring, actually, because I know, Lauren, you've already seen a little bit of this initial town and kind of Trader's Island, which is where we found the master merchant and that kind of thing, which will come up, maybe it's worth doing like very short, quick little scenes through that, which will give you guys all a flavor of it. But it will also, like, all of them will end with kind of the failure to acquire these items, right? Let's like presuppose that these items cannot be found here, not in this first initial, town. It is really deeper within the land that you're going to have to find these things. So we're kind of already, I think we should already be resigned to the fact that it's not going to be that simple, right?
And that's like
Lauren,
a nice kind of thing that could tie us together there.
Oh yeah.
Because it's like, yeah, you can get what you want, but you're going to have to go really deep into the kingdom, and you're only going to be able to get that far if you help each other out, kind of thing.
Kind of.
Yeah, go ahead.
Kind of, for example, because Ursan is like Uplander, so he's from here. So, for example, I'm totally fine with maybe Ursan people who are under some kind of curse, as he mentioned before. I think. Maybe I don't know, maybe they are the spirit mango farmers or something. And I'm totally fine with playing out some scene, how it came that Maki like promised and consented that I will help you leave the curse if your village can provide like not a truck, but not a couch, but a wagon of spirit mangoes.
Yeah, well, I mean, maybe the reason that that my village, like Candice, is cursed is because our harvest has failed this year. Our harvest of spirit mangoes.
I like that.
So I'm totally fine this way, and then we can play some scene like how we came to be that I like said that I will help.
Okay. I've got some thoughts that use this, so this is great. Lauren, you looked really excited for a second. What were you going to say?
I think it was that like that sounds like work.
I have some thoughts. So first, let's do this. I would like to see like very short vignettes of you guys maybe using something about the gates here and then showing us one of these other traits. And these can be very personal to your character, or it could be in some interaction if you already have thoughts on that. Great. So let's do a very short thing like that. And then we'll see where it goes. I have some ideas.
Could I ask a question? For
Absolutely.
some reason, I can't see the final two traits because they're covered up by the little windows on the bottom.
Sure. So the 5 traits that you'll find here are trusted, unflinching, lore, rich, and chosen.
Lore, rich, and chosen. Cool. Thank you.
When you are viewing the slide, and then if you go up to the screen just next to the mute, you should see like a hide users, and then our pictures will disappear and you will see all of the text.
Oh, okay. I see. Yeah, I see it. Okay, cool. Thank you.
Nice.
I just didn't want to hide your beautiful faces. That's
I
all.
just rearranged the windows so that like.
Cool.
Is anyone ready? And if you want any specific kind of music and you have thoughts on what that music might sound like, I mean, just like tone, I might have an idea. Otherwise, I'm just going to keep playing what I've got in the background. Which, by the way, for Paul, I don't know if you came back. Right now I'm playing 9S, which is the slow drums track.
I have a quick vignette in mind. It's quite eerie, like sort of misty ghost kind of sounds. Oops.
So this works.
This one right now?
Yeah, or do you want me to? I've got
this
another one.
Sorry, I thought you said this works, and I wasn't sure if you were searching, but this
Here,
is perfect.
let's try. Ooh. Let's try this one. 9M.
9M. Yeah, perfect. So I think like Panya is half draped like along the side of this ship, sort of like watching the water like lap up against the side of the boat we're in. And she peers through the mist that's hovering just above the surface, and she swears that she can see like the lick of a tail to like dip in and out of the water, which makes sense. This is like crocodile territory. But I think as she stares at the movement in this water, it becomes very hypnotic, and she can't like take her eyes off of it. And then she hears like in her other ear this really like low, rich, rumbling laughter. So like starts quite quiet and grows. And it says like, haha, I was not expecting to see you again here so soon, young one. And Panya's like, this is the first time I've been here. I've lived my whole life in Meriting. And then the crocodile voice laughs like sort of, oh, does that sound like, it sounds like Paul. Oh, internet connection. The crocodile says, huh, no, you have not been here yet, but it is a place you will be. A place you will not return to. And Panya shrinks in her seat a bit. And she says, what are you? And she trails off. It's like she looks up, and just as they're passing through like the mouths of the crocodile bridge, there's a familiar silhouette in the distance, just visible through the mist that she can make out. That's like wandering around the bottom teeth there. She peers a bit closer and closer, and she can just make out like a silhouette of like maybe that is a rat on the shoulder of the thing in the distance. And then she looks back to like where the crocodile was in the water, and when she does, she sees a very ghastly image of herself draped in pondweed with like seaweed covering her face and her hair like scraggly like a swamp witch. And she startles. And the swamp witch like grins with these like very crocodile-like teeth, and it's her face and it's her eyes, but it's a crocodile mouth. And it opens wider and wider, like impossibly wide. And like goes to chomp down on her. And Panya shrieks and like lurches backwards. And if Mahi is around, I will give you the late trait trusted if you save Panya from falling into the crocodile's mouth in the water.
Sure. I zoned out at the beginning. You were talking with the crocodile about like cleaning over the edge of the boat, or like what?
Yeah. Panya was like looking down in the water, and she got hypnotized by the crocodile that was like swimming adjacent to the boat. And then she had some ghostly images of herself as a crocodile, and then panicked and is about to fall into the crocodile's mouth.
Yeah, so well, it's a little bit of Asian story. So maybe we see you like slowly leaning over and like falling out, and then as the crocodile like almost you're in, we see a hand like grabs you by the feet and like pulls you up, and like the mouth like
Yes. Oh, it's so good.
and Maki is standing there, and he like flexes his hand. We see that it costed him like dearly to use his damaged hands, and he says, "Well, despite what Ursan-san says, crocodiles are tricky, and you would better not trust them fully."
I think Panya is just like shaking and shivering, like, and probably like clutching at you a bit, and like it's just like sort of going, "Oh my god, thank you!" I was so terrified.
What have you seen over there?
I was told that I have been here before. No, it's not quite right. That I will be here, and that I don't return. But I promised my mom I would.
I have traveled far and wide. Some cultures around the world can play with the fabric of time, although I did not expect crocodiles to know about this.
No, they weren't being serious, right? Like that was just a trick.
Nah, dear child. And he would like pat you on your like hair. Nah, child. They were just mocking you. Don't worry, you will be fine.
Okay, and she rubs her head, but like you patted it. She's like, okay, thanks, Mahi. You like literally saved my life.
Out here,
Nina,
there's
in the
only
meantime,
4 of us.
And Nina's behind you guys, right? And we see like when all this is like your conversation is continuing about all this stuff, and especially when you were talking, Panya, about what the crocodile had told you about coming back and forth and that kind of thing. We see her do some symbol on herself, like with her hands, and it looks like a ward, right? Like one of those, people are scared of something, so they ward themselves against evil, right? And she does that with her hands. But she's not talking to you guys specifically.
Kakura, the rat, probably like shrinks back against that like sign of protection and buries herself like deep within Panya's robes. That music was spot on, by the way, Tomes. I was like, yes, I could.
That's what I was thinking as I was playing. There was even a part where you were starting to look at the shadow across the water, and it was hitting really hard right then. It was kind of funny.
That's my favorite. Oh, it was so good. I'm gonna beat myself.
I see. So Paul got dropped off. I sent him a quick message in the Slack, just in case he's online, but maybe having a problem getting into Hangouts. So in the meantime, though, what we can do is, so we've got trusted for Miho, right? Mahi, sorry, I'm thinking of a friend of mine.
Yeah, I think it's fine. I'll be lucky and trusted.
If not, I'm more than happy to take lore, or you could have unflinching, because you were very like, gonna grab you and save you from the crocodile.
I'm fine with trusted. I actually wanted to like, I wish Paul was here. Like at the end of the scene with Ursan, I totally imagine Maki saying, "It's hard for me to decide, Ursan. Are you wise man or completely reckless?"
Oh, nice.
So like unflinching or lore, whatever he fancy most.
That would have been beautiful.
One thing I'd like to do, I mean, I don't mind waiting for a minute or two if we can try to get in touch with him. I do have an idea of what we can do real quick as far as the next scenes, like little individual scenes prior to jumping back here, and we can work with Paul and Ursun to see how the rest of this plays out. But what do you guys think? I'm happy to do.
Paul sent a message on Hangout. My broadband connection has totally died. A sudden tragic death. I'm sorry, everyone.
Okay. Let's see here.
He wrote before that he's trying to get back through the phone connection. So I'm looking at a normal Hangout chat for our group.
Okay. So we will make this work. If you guys are good to continue, we have almost another hour, right? And as far as time, you guys are good till the top of this hour, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, then now I feel cursed because this is the second time in a row that I played this game and someone's had to drop out.
Well, but in that case, so Ari told me ahead of time that he only had 2 hours, right? And I don't know if I communicated that to you guys in the beginning of the game, but me and Ari were like, oh, we got to like time it so that right when he's got to go, some big thing happens. And then, and we made that work story-wise. And I think we can make this work story-wise as well. So what I'd like to do is we're going to, did Lauren, did Panya get another, you said plus lore, right? Did you want to add that as the thing?
Yeah, I could add plus lore for me for sure.
Okay.
I wasn't aware I could be greedy and assign 2 tags.
You can be greedy. I mean, again, if we don't want to give Mahi that tag, you can totally, Paul, you control Mahi, right? If you've got other thoughts.
Trusted is fine. I'm not sure if there is some way I can like rely on this trait later on because it seems to be very like helping related.
Yes. However, it's also I would say think about it as something that can be manipulated, right? You're meeting somebody and you're able to give them a sense of who you are immediately, right? So it's almost like a charismatic trait as well, right?
Yeah.
So, we can spin it in different ways in different contexts. But like Lauren said, if you want to take unflinching or any of the other ones, we can also talk about that.
I think Trusted works really well. I haven't yet decided what agent of Crutching means, so
yes,
I totally imagine he's like a secret agent for another empire, so Trusted is like perfect.
Oh, perfect, yeah.
Okay, that is great. I love it. So what I'd like to do is fast forward a little bit and we can go to another location. Paul, did you want to do a scene here with one of those, or you're good to move on?
I actually started the one with riding the giant crocodile.
Okay.
So yeah, I'm fine.
Okay, cool. So let's do this. Ugh, this music. I love it. By the way, this track is from The Handmaid's Tale. Have you guys seen that at all? Oh, that music is killer.
I keep meaning to, but then I'm like, oh, it's heavy watching.
it's heavy watching. You have to be ready for heavy watching. But specifically, the soundtrack is just really intense. There's actually a couple other tracks, so we'll see if we run into them, I'll let you know. Okay, so where we're going to go next is I'd like to do little scenes where it's you guys as individuals, right? So maybe you haven't decided yet that you are all working together toward a common goal, right? Like, oh yeah, okay, well, we've met each other. We've helped each other in some way, perhaps. We've had conversations. But it's that part of the TV show where it's like, okay, they obviously look like these are the main characters. And then the next scenes, we see them split into different directions and do different things, unknowing that they will again come together, with some shared purpose or with, to help each other with their various goals. So at this point, I think they all still think individually that maybe they won't see each other again. So, let me, I'm going to put another track here. 3M markets. Let's do that. So we find Nina's raft pull up, and there's a stone embankment, and this is the biggest congregation of people and things that we've seen for days, right? I mean, it's been like wilderness travel, over the river the last 5 days, and now we find ourselves here, and it's a bustling town, right? I mean, there are people everywhere. There are huge stone ruins from old temples. There are, different shacks and houses and everything all over the place. Curiously enough, all the houses are made out of, the material of the land, right? So it's made out of wood and teak and palm fronds. We don't see anybody making anything out of stone to live in, right? Even that stone embankment looks like it's been there for who knows how long, ages, right? The stones are worn very, very soft. It doesn't look like they've been maintained in any way. But that's where the boat pulls up amongst many boats. And we see people all over the bank, chatting with each other, and merchants arguing with each other. One or two people look like they're about to go to fists, and they're having a fight over something, right? Maybe it has to do with goods. And we find ourselves here, and Nina says, "Welcome to Merkur Singa." And she says that in a very, we see a big smile on her face, like she's happy to be back, right? And then she realizes kind of who she's talking to. She was initially, she's like facing the town and saying it as if to herself. But then she turns, and again, her look gets a little more dour, and she says, "Just call it Singa. They may get upset if you don't pronounce it right." And, she pulls up next to the shore, and we see her get out. She turns back for a second, though, and she points at you. We see her reach back, and she pulls out a handful of coins in her hand. And, she picks one up and puts it in her mouth and snaps it, right? And it's like a piece of wood, right? I mean, it looked like a coin, but it's just, a piece of wood. And she spits out the other half on the ground, and sprinkles the rest, and they go clinking on the stone there. And she says, "You owe me. You owe me." And she turns and walks back into the crowd. And we see her, like, again, she seems really kind of like not particularly happy until she gets into the crowd, and suddenly, one or two individuals run up to her, like little children. There's a crocodile that happens to be there on the land, and there's a couple of them around. Like, they seem to be interspersed with the people just walking around the town, right? As if that's just normal. And I guess here it's normal. And one of the crocodiles comes up, and you can see her animated in a conversation, and she reaches down and kind of caresses the crocodile, right? And suddenly she looks really happy, like she's in her element. But we see her fade into the crowd. So what we're going to do here is I want you guys to set a scene where you're trying to find the thing you're looking for, but failing, right, in some way. And even though we necessarily won't roll dice to figure out the resolution of stuff, because we can see how bad you fail and what that means, what comes up in the scene. But we're not going to find our thing, right? If we're looking for the spirit mango, we're not going to find the spirit mango here, but we might find hints as to where it is, right? So there's a couple of story prompts here. You can use them, as an option, or, if you have a different idea, that's fine too. Lauren looks like she's got a thing.
I have a thing, but it's not related to finding honey. It's to try
Which is fine.
It's trying to make it up to Nina.
That sounds great. I love it.
Because I think Panya goes like, bright red when her cantrip was found out, because she really hadn't thought about how to, like, how that was gonna work for her in the long term. So I think like Panya watches Nina go, and she sighs and like picks up Kakura in her hands. She's like, "All right, Kakura, you know what we have to do." And Kakura's like nose like twitches, and she puts like Kakura on her shoulder, and she wanders into, I think, like the street markets, and she throws down perhaps like she probably like pilfers a hat or something from like a stall nearby, just like slips into her pocket, and then she like sort of throws it down on the ground like at a street corner, and she's like steps up a bit onto like a box, and she's like, "Everyone, like gentlemen, ladies, friends, 'tis I, the great esteemed Panya, traveled all the way from Merating to help you with all that ails you. I have with me fineries from Merating, cleansing waters to cure all illnesses. I have the foresight to deal with your most intimate problems. Have you ever wondered where you've left your keys and you haven't been able to find them? Well, I have the divine wisdom and power to help you find them, whatever it is, big or small." Then I think like she's gonna try and do some reverse snake oil witchery.
That's awesome. I love the fact that we hear this, and she says the word fineries, and we're seeing like these kind of like rags that she's wearing, right? Like dirty, and a couple of holes down toward the bottom. I think as she's doing this and getting onto the stage, there's a couple of the people, like more than a few, do that symbol, that like warding evil symbol as they walk by, right? But maybe you get a little bit of a crowd. There's some people who are definitely interested. Do we want to? Okay, so first of all, I'm going to change the track to 3C. Let's see how that sounds. Yes, let's do that.
That'll work. Added new tracks? I only see 3, 3, and 3.
Oh, I might have renamed them. Crowds and Crocodiles. I'll give you the full name. I think I renamed them after I uploaded them so that they have a distinct number letter, so that'll be easier to tell you what to play. But I forgot to re-upload them. So it should be 3 Crowds and Crocodiles.
Perfect.
Okay. So I think we're seeing people like come up and she's doing this thing. I'm curious. Do you want to? So this sounds like a conflict. So within the context of what I've done with the game, a conflict means it's time to roll some dice and see how the conflict comes out. Now, sometimes we know already kind of what's at stake and what exactly you're trying to do. Here, we kind of generally know what you're trying to do. So we could roll the dice now, or we can kind of role play and see kind of what comes up and then see the result of that. But I'm happy to do it either way. Would you like to roll dice first, or shall we have somebody come up?
I'm fine with somebody. I have an idea for someone coming up. I'm just gonna like Panya does bullshit right through whatever their problem is. If they need healing, if they need advice, if they
Can we have a random person come up? So one of the only things that has mechanics within the setting as it's written is the random encounter tables, right? So there are some fantastic random encounter tables. Excellent. So the one I'm going to right now is People of the Death-Rolled Kingdom. So what you're going to do is go into the roll for your party. And I will recommend that you uncheck the sort dice box, because that way the 3 dice won't come out lowest to highest. They'll just come out randomly. So it's more like random dice, right? And you're going to roll 3 d10s, not d6, but d10s.
3 d10s. I'll make them.
And let's see what happens.
I have a 2 and a 3.
Okay. So before, let's see who comes up for help here. So a couple things. So you're up there on the stage, and this is where us as the audience, right, as the crowd, we're going to watch the crowd come by, and we see a couple of things. Reptile motifs everywhere, right? People have a stick that looks like some kind of serpent. Maybe it's even a crocodile. It's got like legs on it, right? We see one or two people walk by with kind of tattoos that look reminiscent of different kinds of reptiles. And of course, we actually see reptiles, right? So we're seeing crocodiles walk down the street as well. In fact, we see a very, very huge reptile being carried by 4 humans, right? With like big sticks over their shoulders, holding it up in some kind of like a hammock. And this crocodile is like, I mean, it's fat, right? It is like overabundant. Like its legs probably can't reach the ground if it was put on the ground. Like it is huge. And like the people are obviously the servants carrying this royal crocodile. That's the impression you get, right? Because the crocodile itself has jewelry and things on it, right? Like it's obviously rich, so all of this is going on as you're up there on your stage. And so long as taboos are observed and the scale ones sated, they are much like people elsewhere, just trying to get by, right? And we get that sense, like these are people of all classes and jobs. We do see a beggar in a corner, but we also see like the rich merchant walking with the human merchant walking with its rich crocodile friend, through the street, right? Like people of all description. So let's see, we've got 5, 2, and 3. So the person that walks up to us, he's got, and so it looks like a guy. He's got something about his hands, right? At first, his hands are behind his back, so maybe we don't even see them. But as he listens to your spiel, we see one of his hands come out, and he absentmindedly like scratches his head. And as he does so, we see that his hand is like a claw. I mean, this hand looks like a crab claw, right? And we're not sure if it's actually a claw from like the animal claw or if it's been burned. I mean, in fact, we're seeing this at the same time as we've just seen our friend, our friend Mahi, with his scarring, right? And it kind of feels reminiscent, although in this case it's red, like a bright red color, right? As if the skin is kind of peeled off and shown, some of the flesh below. But it looks hard. He's sitting there scratching his head, and like leans his chin on it, like he doesn't seem embarrassed about it at all, right? And we see like that's only one hand. The other hand is holding a very large blowpipe, right? It's taller than he is, and we see some feather connected to the top of it. And so we get the impression that from his dress that he's some kind of hunter, right? And he's looking at you very, very calm, and he says, "I wonder which," and he just straight up says which, right? He's like, "I wonder which. Could you help me with my particular problem?"
Oh, of course, good sir. I can help you with any problem. Please, what is your name?
And he turns and he says, "My name is Jali. And unfortunately, my problem is very severe. I would say it's a matter of life or death."
It does indeed sound very serious, Jolly. She does a flourishing bow. Perhaps I can help.
And he says, "Oh dear, I hope so. And I hope you work very quickly." And we see him like, his face kind of turns a little painful, and he reaches over and he like, he coughs, and it's like a really throaty, deep cough. And you look on the ground and you see blood, right? Like he's actually coughing up blood, right? And he goes down on one knee and kind of turns a little bit so you can see his back shoulder. And there's literally like a knife sticking out of his shoulder, right? And it's a weird looking knife. I mean, like the handle itself looks like it's made of some shell or something. But it's embedded in his shoulder. And he turns to you and he says, "Stingray venom." And, that part comes out not quite as confident as the prior side. And you can hear there's some kind of commotion over on the other side of the market there, or the street. You're not sure if it's related at all. But, he said, "Fortunately, it's only been 2 minutes. I have at least a minute to spare." And he collapses in front of you, right? And you can see this blade just sticking out of his shoulder.
Like you see Panya do just that. Like her she goes from this like very flourishing like little spiel to like and I think she like looks to Kakura, and Kakura looks back at her and it's like, "Oh, I'm the wrong demon." You need to find me a character. Oh, that's so cool. Yeah, so I think like Panya has a moment of panic, and then she just like calms herself. And internally, she's thinking like, "It's okay, Panya. Like, this is in your legacy. Your mother is a healer. She's a surgeon. Like, you can do this. Like, this is in your blood." So she's like trying to like calm her shaking hands, and then I think she's gonna try and pull the poison out of his wound. Kind of like you draw like, I don't know, bits of string or essence, that kind of thing. Like she's gonna try and physically like pull it out, and I think she's gonna try and store it into a little like vial that she has.
Oh, nice. Okay. So we're going to do a conflict roll here. We're going to roll a d6, and we're going to apply any traits that may relate to this, including negative traits, which would provide a negative one. So the best you can do with a conflict roll is to add 1 or 2, and the worst you can do is to subtract 1 or 2 if things apply. Now, you may be asking yourself, well, I only have 1 negative trait, but that can change over time, right? As things get applied to you, positive or negative. But in this case, do we think that destitute, has any kind of negative connotation here? I personally don't think so, but
I don't think so. Yeah, so I think she's trying to draw this like with her own power within, I think is separate from like her destitution. Yeah. But I think lore might come into play.
Yeah. So you have lore, and you also have cantrips. So you're actually using magic to pull this stuff out. It's not purely just, biological skill, right? So I think both of them can apply. So you would add a +2 to your roll. Now, yeah. Or what do you think?
That sounds perfect. I think also visually, like drawing this stuff out, probably looks more like spider silk than anything.
I love it. Yeah. So the way these rolls work, it's going to be a d6, and you're going to add that. Now, if you have no regardless of the bonuses, a 1 to 3 is considered a miss, right? That's a big range. That's 50%. A 4 to 6 is considered a partial success, and a 6 would be considered a success, much like a PBTA game, right? And in this case, like normally the odds are stacked somewhat against you, and that's because this is an OSR kind of game as far as, whatever. So it's going to be dangerous as shit, and you're probably going to get into trouble and die. There's that aspect. But, in this case, you've got a +2. So it's kind of like switched the statistics, I guess. But yeah, roll a d6 and let's see what happens.
Awesome. 1d6 or 2d6?
Just 1.
I'll do it. Should I do it again? I got a 1 and a 3.
Sure, just do it again. It's fine.
So I used to playing PBTA.
Yeah.
Oops. 1d6. I got a 3 plus 2 is a 5.
Okay. So +2. So a 5 is a partial success, right? So I think this is how it's going to go. First of all, like we see a crowd. A crowd is gathered around this, right? I don't know if Panya even notices at this point, right? Because she's just so into what she's doing, right? And this is our first time like seeing like her magic truly like manifest in this kind of way, right? And as you've described, it kind of looks almost like you're pulling spider silk out of the wound.
Yeah,
right?
her fingers probably looking a bit spidery too, like kind of like spider claws. As she's like manipulating like the spidery thread, like to try and figure out this poison.
And I think we see you doing it, and you're pulling this stuff into your vial, and in fact you feel that this is right. Like what you have in the vial is this stingray venom that you've pulled out of the wound, right? That I guess somebody put on this blade, right, to kill this guy. And you feel like you've gotten the majority of it, right? Like it's obvious you can't quite get it all, but you've got like 95% of this venom out of the guy's body, right? And in your head, you're like that hopefully that'll be enough, right? You don't know how powerful this venom is. And the crowd is like holding their breath, watching this. And we see the guy kind of like blink a little. He gets up on his hands and knees as if he's definitely got some strength back, and he coughs once or twice, and some more blood kind of like goes out onto the street, right, onto the dirt there. But he kind of gets up and he's kind of wavering a little bit, but he looks at you, and we see him unfocused at first, but then he focuses his eyes directly at you, and he says, "Thank you, witch." And he falls back and lands on his back, and he's dead, right? 100% dead. And another person comes out of the crowd, and she's dressed very similarly, right? She's also got like this waist sarong that she's kind of wearing. She's got a huge blow staff, and a couple of swords, kind of, behind her, or blades or something in scabbards. And she comes up and she says, he didn't get away. Yes, he got what he deserved. And, she looks down at him and looks up at you and says, thank you. Thank you for preventing his escape. Not that he would have gotten that far. Ha! And she pulls out a couple of coins from her purse and just kind of like flicks them in the air, and they head straight toward you. I mean, you can catch them in the air if you like. And she says, "Good day to you," and turns and just walks off. After she pulls that blade, from the ground, or maybe it's still in his body, but it picks up the blade from the ground, sticks it back in the empty scabbard that she has behind her, and she walks off into the crowd. Right.
I think Panya does like catch the coins, and she watches that fantastically amazing woman leave. She looks at the dead guy. She looks at the crowd that is looking at her, and then she just like wide-eyed turns tail and like runs away from the situation.
And I think like as she does that, we even see like one or two people come up, who look like they're dressed in something maybe more official. Like there's a sash that they're wearing of a specific color. They both look like they're wearing like similar garb, right? And they're just holding like staffs, and they're trying to assess the situation. Like it could be the town guard or who knows what, but they're obviously like trying to figure out what to do. But you're gone by then, right? We see you like run into the crowd.
Yeah, there's probably like a nice bulbous like shadow of a spidery body like on like just creeping over Panya's like other shoulder.
Nice. All right. Oh, that's awesome. Okay. Yeah, what do we want to see next? Mahi? And let me know what you're thinking as far as what kind of part of town or what kind of music, because I can change it up to be appropriate.
Yeah. I think the theme will be kind of similar, but we are going into this like a shadowy figure dressed in like a dark color, sneaking through the roofs of the buildings behind some two figures walking on the ground level. So whichever you find most fancy.
Let's see here. I think let's do
Maybe Chase.
I think we got. Oh, chase would be good. Yeah, the chase is kind of intense. Are you ready for it? I mean, start slow. Okay, let's do it. So it'll be 9C, and I think there's a C there, right?
Yeah.
Counters chase. Okay.
Yeah. So as it starts slow. So as it starts slow, we see it's like later, maybe the same day, maybe the next day. Who knows? It's like dark. People are like leaving the market and going to various like tea houses, coffee shops, kebab stand is like very popular. And we see this like man walk out from this like bursting, very crowded tavern with like a colorfully dressed bodyguard with like a huge sword, like a 2 meters long, and clearly a bodyguard. And we see them like moving through the streets, and we see this shadowy figure, which we clearly know that the shadowy figure. Wait, I need to lower the volume. Yeah, we clearly know that this shadowy figure is Mahi, and at some point, while they are kind of enough in like a street with not so many people, we see Mahi like pull out a blowpipe and like shoots the guard, and he like catches this, like turns, and just like falls unconscious, and then maybe the man is like he's like kind of like a dressed like a local merchant, like a kind of like an upper class. Also something like blue and maybe like some scaly motifs because the crocodile are very popular here. And he like turns and he sees this and he like bursts into run, and then we see like he's running on the streets. Mahi's he's running on the roofs. He like does a little bit like Cross Tiger, Hidden Dragon, like between the roofs, and then maybe he like manages to corner the man somewhere. Like he runs somewhere and exit is barred, and he cannot like escape. And I haven't decided why we know it's Mahi, because even though he's wearing like a black mask and a black kimono, his like entire hand it's like sleeveless, so we see his hand with his burns, almost like a mark of honor. And Maki approaches the man. He says, "And you thought that you can just leave the service of the Kraching? Nobody leaves our service. I'm here to settle the deal, but we might come to a trade if you need what I need, if you have what I need."
And I think we see, first of all, there's a couple of things we see in the background here. As Mahi is we're seeing him in the screen and for the first time, right? Like, okay, we maybe guessed who it was, but now we know it's Mahi. And he's saying this to this merchant. In the background, we do see on there's like some little fences and that kind of thing. There's a cat silently kind of walking across that, like observing the scene, right? But the merchant is cowering, right? He's hands up and shaking, and like, or who we thought was a merchant, and he says, I left that behind. They promised I'd be done with that.
You don't leave. Once you work for the Krachink, you always work for us. Once you make a pledge to be our agent, you always will be our agent. You cannot leave it.
And we see him look down, and he pulls absentmindedly, kind of like pulls his sleeve up, and we can see that there's some kind of markings there, right, on his arm, which maybe we're guessing has to do with a marking that either was maybe it has to do with marking him as an agent, maybe not. We don't know. But he lets go of that, and he says, "Look, I've created a good life for myself and for my family. What is it that what can I provide you? Look, I'll do anything."
Spirit mangoes, a lot of them.
And he gets a little confused look on his face, and he says, I'll give you information that could save your journey months. But you have to promise. You have to promise I'm done.
If your information proves truthful, I will consider this.
And by the way, I think at this point we see his hand like leaning back and reaching for something, right? He's definitely reaching for some kind of probably like a blade or something like that, right? So, and I think from the audience's view, right, we see that as the two of you are talking.
Yeah, and the camera is behind him, and we see him like reaching, but Mahi cannot see this.
Yeah, and so he says, I'll give you what information you need as long as you promise. And he's like making you say it again, right? And then let's roll and let's see what our result is here. This sounds like a good conflict.
Yeah. So
what are you going to? Are there any traits that apply here? Now you're lucky.
I think trusted mostly. Lucky.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, you need this guy to trust that you are good to your word, right?
Yeah.
Lucky, it's up to you. What do you think? Does it apply?
Lucky is so broad, although I totally envision that lucky is like more of like the bad stuff doesn't happen to Mahi, this kind of luck. Like if there is some arrow flying at him, someone will step in away out of pure luck and like he will catch the arrow. So I think it's like more like a physical problem solving, avoiding luck than in this case. So I will apply only trusted.
Okay. And I don't think maimed will provide any negative here. So let's roll with a +1 and see what we get.
Yeah, I'll grab yellow. And oh yeah, nothing can help it. It's a 2.
Yeah. So I think we see him and he kind of I think he says, you'll find them in the market here. In fact, go see Pura. Pura sells the best spirit mangoes. And I think you hear this and it sounds legit. Like he's not lying about the person. There is a Pura there. Like you can tell, like you've been an agent, so you know a little bit about when someone is completely fabricating something just to try to keep alive, right? Versus they're telling you truth, and there's truth in his words. There is a Pura here, and the Pura sells spirit mangoes, and he's telling you go to the market, you will find them there. And I think you ease up a little bit because you can see he's being truthful. And that's when he like flicks out this blade toward you, right? And I think it catches you off guard. I don't think it's a deep injury, but I want to give you the negative trait injured, right? So we'll add a negative injured there. So that may come up when the situation comes up. And this is something that I think you would be able to heal from in fairly short order. I don't think this is any kind of like big wound, right? But we see this blade go out and, your eyes go wide and you kind of are able to at least move a little bit so it just slashes your arm, right? So it's not like a mortal wound or anything like that. And what do you want to do here? I'm happy if you kill the guy or he runs off. It's what, like, that's the worst of it, is that he's giving you this information that sounds legit, but we're going to find out is not. And, you're going to come away injured.
Yeah. I think we see him like jump over the thing that was blocking the exit path, and maybe he like lands on the other side and like I mean the man I was talking to, and he like breathes heavily and tries to run away, but he like walks slower and slower, and then he walks and then he turns and like we see this like a pipe dart like sticking out and like, oh no, and it's like collapses. But then we also see like the camera flips over to the Mahi and we see him like slowly walking away, like with this like bleeding now, not only burned, but the other hand is like bleeding, and yeah, maybe he like slips away, also like leaving some bloody marks on the wall. But he like as he like tries to walk just next to the wall. So
I love it. All right, I'm going to pause this track for a second. Yeah, so no, that's perfect. And I think, where we want to go with this, and, maybe we'll wrap up here and we can see, how we can connect with Paul the next time around. But, and maybe we can do this as a very short vignettes, like how you don't find what you're looking for right here. So, we have Panya looking for corpse honey, right? And I think we catch this scene definitely with Panya in the market. And where does it look like they have what you want, right? Like, what do you see that makes it look like you've got it?
No, I know exactly what it is. I think Panya spends the afternoon trying to track down like a purveyor of corpse honey, and she hears through like word of mouth throughout the street that like there's an old lady who like lives in a hovel house down the lane here, and she finally finds this place, and she like gets this woman. But the conversation is very much like, I heard you had corpse honey, and then she's like, yes, I have like what rhymes with corpse? Like, oh, I have
I mean,
Schwab's
there's
honey.
copse, like a copse of trees.
Right? Oh yeah. She's like, corpse honey. Like, oh yes, I have a job that's like. She's like, no, corpse honey. Like, I'm sorry, I have red amber. No, corpse honey. I think after like that back and forth a lot of times, like she turns around and she's just like, oh yeah.
She's in this, like, I mean, you're in this like large hovel, and behind the woman is like jars and jars of like honey, right? Of this different colored liquids, right?
Oh,
and she's
yeah.
like, oh, which honey? Like that. She's like going through the shelves. I think even just before you walked in, there was like what looked like, maybe like a skull, amongst the other stuff that adorned the front of this place. So it's like, oh, corpse honey, right? Like that's you walking into the place, and it's like, ooh, I think I'm on the right track, right?
Yeah. And and this woman fully has like one of those very like beehive hairdos. It's like, and like sort of very lavender, like white hair that wraps up so high on her head. And I think she even has like bees that are sort of just like hiding out in it as well. And it's like, she probably has some honeycomb brooches, and like their bees are like hanging out in these little tiny bee hotels that are like woven into her hair, and they're kind of like lazing around her and stuff.
That's awesome. Even little like flowers that she's put in there. So sometimes they're like going up and doing their thing. And
yes, oh totally. Yeah. And her whole dress is like very like elaborate, like sort of like browns and golds and that kind of thing, and
right.
blacks. With like the big glasses. Yeah, and then I think like and then finally Panya gets across like corpse honey, and like just gesturing at the skull and stuff, and she's like, oh
right.
yeah.
And I think she turns and she's like, oh dear. And she turns around and she's got this little like vellum piece of scroll, right? And she pulls out something, which is I guess a pen, and she starts writing, and she says, corpse honey, oh dear. And she's writing and writing and writing. She refers to some book and writing, and she rolls it up and hands it over to you. But before she lets go, she says, oh, my dear, that will only be 2 coins.
And Panya goes to grab the paper and then like stops and just says 2 coins.
Let's see if she has 2 coins. Maybe that's what you have left from the vendor, but you're also destitute. So I don't know. This sounds like a good, quick conflict roll to me.
Oh yeah, I love it.
Let's do it.
Yeah, my destitute is definitely playing. And
now, are any of the other things playing in here? You've got.
I guess it depends if I want to try and trick her with a fake coins again.
I'm happy with that.
Yeah, why not? It'll be fun if I fail.
Sure. So it's going to be a flat roll then, I think. The +1 for the cantrips, the -1 for the destitute, and then let's see what happens.
Yeah, Panya goes to grab it, and she's like, that'll be 2 coins. She's like, of course. Let me reach into my pouch and pull out my coins.
Right.
I'll roll that purple dice again. Actually, I'll roll another die. I can never know if my rerolls
if it
count.
refreshed or not. Yeah.
Let's roll a orange dice. I got a 4.
Okay, so a 4. That's a partial success, right? And so I think what happens is, well, let me see here. Yeah, I mean, I've got an idea, if you're cool. So I think you pull out these coins, and we see, your like, how does your magic, like, how do we physically see that in the scene, if any way?
Ooh, yeah. No, I love this a lot. So like the pouch looks very light, right? Which makes sense because it's just wood. But I think Panya makes a show of like putting her hand in there and like feeling around this very heavy bag full of like heavy coins. And then as we pull it out, the audience
we see her finger kind of like moving around this empty pouch, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like, and I think like perhaps the audience gets a shot like inside her purse, and it's like she's kind of like, oh yeah, like spider silk spinning like gold around like these wooden coins, and she's like procures from her bag.
And she pulls them out, and I think what we see the vendor let go of the scroll and grab the coin simultaneously with the other hand, very like just at the same time kind of thing. Obviously an experienced merchant, and she opens them and she looks at them kind of quizzically, and scratches her her chin, and looks at you and goes, "My dear, there was no need to do such a thing." And she kind of like does this thing with her hand, and like the fake magic stuff you have, we can see it like break off and splinter, almost like paint chips coming off. But there's actually 2 coins there, right? Like you actually had 2 proper coins. Now you have nothing, but it was those last 2 coins that you got from from that hunter, right? And so she says, why cover gold with silver? And she takes them and pockets them. And what you find, though, the other side of this is you haven't actually purchased any honey. All she's given you is some instructions, but those instructions might be valuable to you, right? So the instructions themselves talk about how to get corpse honey, and we will talk about that a little bit later.
I think Panya leaves with a when the bee merchant is like, "Why do you cover gold with silver?" Panya's like, "Haha, well, you never can be too careful with tricksters these days, And like leaves.
And I think she genuinely doesn't, doesn't think that you've done something bad. She's like, "Oh, huh," and she's like trying to figure it out, but doesn't quite understand. Just shrugs her, her shoulders, and puts them in her little change box or whatever. All right, let's see. Mahi and how he doesn't get, like, he's looking for spirit mangoes, right? Now, I will say this. Spirit mangoes are a magnet for scam artists in this land, because spirit mangoes cannot be seen except for those with second sight. So what is the situation where you are possibly either sold or someone's attempting to sell you fake spirit mangoes, fake invisible spirit mangoes?
Mm.
And it could be they're actually selling you physical mangoes that you find out later are not spirit mangoes, right? Even though they tell you that they are.
Yeah. So I was told the name of the merchant, and I suppose that she is. Do you remember her name? P something.
I think it was Puri, maybe.
Puri. Yeah. So I think Puri doesn't run like an ordinary stall on the market. She has like her shop in like a brick concrete, not a concrete, but like a building, and
Sure.
and it almost looked like an alchemist store. So
I'm gonna put a track up, which is I'm going to put up Jungle Tavern. It doesn't have a number. It's at the bottom of the list somewhere. But you should see it. I think when you walk into this, by the way, like coming up to it, we're like, ooh, a stone building. Like we haven't seen a stone building yet. And as we come closer, I think we realize it's not stone. It looks like stone from a distance, but it actually looks like pieces of hardened wood that have been put in a manner that makes it almost look like bricks, right? But yeah. What do we see inside?
Yeah, and there's like a queue to get inside, so Maki actually has to wait, and I think he gets in because they only let in one client at a time to make sure that nobody steals this wonderful alchemical ingredients from this, because Puri actually deals with like rare equipment, and we see like a golden. Various alchemical equipment that I have no idea how to name them.
Yeah.
Some vials, some pots, some Aladdin lamps, and everything. And then he like comes in and he asks, Miss Puri, I was told that you are dealing with and in like a low conspiratorial voice, spirit mangoes.
And her eyes go a little bit wide. And by the way, just for the scene of what this place looks like, this is a large dwelling. She obviously has quite a bit of wealth, right? It's a big shop. Like you said, lots of shelves with lots of stuff. The funniest part was there's 2 guards standing out front, right? And again, when you wanted to walk in, like I think initially you walk up to the guards and you're like ready to walk in, and they put their hand out and they're like, sorry, one at a time. You will have to wait. And, there was nobody else in the line, but they force you to wait until, whoever the current person shopping in there leaves. And as soon as somebody leaves, they're like, proceed, and they allow you in. You walk in and it's not empty. There's like a lot of people there, but they're doing things like there's people cataloging stuff. There's a whole band playing this music that we're hearing, right? Like this is obviously like a big affair. And the actual store itself has probably about a little more than half a dozen people in it, including Puri herself, which is up there in the front. But, I guess they only let one customer in at a time because there's a lot of people here. And Puri is a scaled one. So, she is a relatively small crocodile that's up on a little bit of a dais, right? Like a kind of pedestal. So you're looking at her, almost like looking up at her, right? Because she's just above your height. And she's surrounded by all sorts of stuff and people. She's telling people what to do, right? People cataloging things. But you say, spirit mango. And she turns to you and says, oh, a purveyor of spirit mango. Well, that is a very rare treat. How do you suppose you will be able to correctly identify this spirit mango? Have you seen one before?
Of course I have. I would know the real thing from the fake one, which is total a bluff.
Yeah, and she says
he's chasing a myth. He has no idea.
Right. And I think we can see she kind of smiles at that, right? And she says, "Well, you must be a very powerful merchant indeed if you are able to see the spirit mango. It is not many of your people who can. Maybe a shaman here or there, maybe a wizard here or there, maybe a fool here or there." And she says fool very, very strongly, right? And you're not sure if it doesn't sound like she's making fun of you. Maybe she is, maybe she isn't. But let's see if you can convince her here to give you information that's useful. You will not find the spirit mango here. We know this. But the question is if she's going to give you information that'll help you find it. So this sounds like it's going to be a little bit of a conflict roll. What traits are you going to use here?
I think I'm going to Yeah, I'm not sure if I'm supposed to do it harder for myself or easier.
Whatever you feel like tells a good story.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
to me,
So
trusted still makes sense. Like, even though I think here you're kind of lying, um, I'm okay with trusted being there for reasons.
yeah, actually, this time I wanna lean into like lucky,
Okay.
because this is up your luck, because probably at this point she knows that she can sell me like any kind of bullshit, and he will buy it. So it's mostly his luck that will get him anything over here.
So I know exactly where this is going to go. So go ahead and roll lucky.
Yeah, it's a 5.
Okay. So I think, what she does is she says, okay, I have a test for you. And, she clicks some weird sounds, right, come from her throat. And we see two of her servants immediately stop what they're doing. They turn and walk to a back room. And then they walk back out, and they have 3 baskets in their hands, right, which they lay out in front of you. And all 3 baskets, they're about this big. They're not very large. They're like weaved baskets. All 3 of them are empty, as far as like there's nothing in them, right? And she says, well, my friend, I happen to have a spirit mango here. Now, I know you say you're looking for more than one spirit mango, and but I need to make sure that you know what you're doing. And she says, please identify which one of these baskets holds the spirit mango. And they look 100% identical, right? They're just 3 empty baskets. And I think you point at one, right? And this is where lucky comes in, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And,
yeah. I think it's like a bit of a scene. He like looks deeply into everyone, like smells it, then checks the other one, then checks the last one. Well, obviously it's this one.
And definitely you're pointing at a random one. Like there was 0 that was different between any of these, right? As far as you know, she's tricking you. All 3 of them are empty, right? It's hard to tell. But you point at one of them, deciding to take the risk. And she kind of like crocodiles can't raise their eyebrow, but whatever she does is kind of like the crocodile version of that. And she says, well, perhaps I was wrong. Maybe you do know what you're doing. So that will put you in good stead, because you will need to use this skill to be able to find them. But unfortunately, my friend, you come too late. I have just sold my last batch of spirit mangoes. How many of them do you need?
About 50 kilograms.
And you see her kind of go apeshit. She's like, at first you think she's like angry, like she looks like she's having a convulsion, and there's a part of you which is like your survival instinct is like run, right? But then you realize she's just kind of like laughing, right? I mean, some of the other employees there don't look scared, and they're also kind of like chuckling and stuff, right? And she says, 50 kilograms, what are you, a king? A king would not come here to buy spirit mangoes for himself. And she says, look, I can tell you where to find them in the wild. However, just know it is not safe there. And you can carry whatever you can carry. But there will be a price. And I think what she wants is she wants you to source spirit mangoes for her. She's going to give you the location, and you will come back and give her half of what you find. That's what she's, attempting to negotiate.
Well, seems like maybe we should split it more evenly, since I'm the one taking the risk, like 70-30.
And she kind of like leans back a little bit, and she nods, and she says, okay, 60-40, but don't test my patience.
Very well.
And you see her kind of reach out with her crocodile claw, and it looks like she picks up whatever was in that empty basket. And she brings it up to her snout, and you see her little nostrils kind of like flare, like she's sniffing it. And you see her like almost like purr, like the crocodile version of purring, right? And she puts it back in. I mean, it looks like air, but she puts it back into that basket, makes that sound for her servants to come and take the baskets out. And I think that's where we see the scene end.
Cool. Throughout the entire scene, I have definitely seen like at least one servant constantly pouring water on her and just like washing the entire body, so that's nice and wet, because it's like because it's a crocodile. They are used to being in the water.
Oh, I love it. Yeah, no, that's great. Awesome. All right, cool. Then I think that's where we will end today's session, and we will continue from there next week.
Yeah, we definitely need our shaman bear to deal with our problems.
Yes. And so hopefully if we get, we find out what happened, like if Paul's able to join us next week. I mean, he's on the list, and hopefully this was just a isolated incident with the internet. But if he is, then we can explore kind of his failed scene there. And, after we do like a quick recap, and then we can go from there.
Cool.
Awesome.
I'm going to hit stop broadcast, but if you guys want to hang out for a second, we can do a little debriefy stuff if you have time, and we'll go from there. But goodbye, internet. See you next time.